Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, YouTube subscribers, friends, and the like. It's Grant coming at you from Super 8 in Marysburg, Dayton, Ohio. I just wanted to go over. I've done this kind of video before, but I want to kind of go over the latest of what I've learned lately, and as I try to decide what I'm going to do about companies. Lately, I've seen, and I'm going to go over with my CPA later on this year, at the end of the tax year. I'm going to take the time, a day or two, and stay in a hotel room and add up kind of the miles that I did for each company and like the expenses of each trip that I did. But just lately, from what I'm seeing, I think my top two companies are Synergy and Quality in terms of the miles and the pay and the ease of being able to take something 4 days and then fly back. They're non-CDL friendly, they're non-tow car friendly, and they have better creature comforts in terms of driver comfort once you're driving down the road and their types of rigs compared to the other ones. And I'm starting to wonder if it's really worth my effort and time personally to run for Pinnacle or Norton. But I was going to go over the pros and cons with you as I've thought it over, and we'll go company by company and see. For those of you who are interested, and this is kind of more for the transporters who want to get into this, the basics of what I've learned anyway, year to date, and it's like 9 months into working for these different companies. So I did it. I drew it back by pros and cons again, and basically we'll go down the pros list. Synergy, especially in the wintertime, has 2,000 miles almost routinely because there's a bunch of snowbird drivers that they have that come back during the summer, and you have to kind of scrap and fight for the loads and be first on the board, calling in and doing it through their app and everything to get the stuff in the summertime. But in the wintertime, it's driver choice pretty much, because right now, so to speak, I think there's about 10 2,000-mile runs, and 5 of those are up in the northwest, which is Washington, Oregon, Northern California, and Idaho. And right now, bad weather and hardcore winds in wintertime over there, I don't think it's worth it to run that exact area. And that's, of course, what everybody else thinks. That's why they have those loads. But the other 5 are down south, going to New Mexico, Arizona, California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida that I saw on the runs. Obviously, the ones that go out west are more the 2,000-mile runs. The ones that go to Florida, I think it's only 1,000. But they get pretty high miles, is what I'm saying. And the higher miles you can get, the easier it is to be able to just fly back and make it be cost effective to fly back. Because if you get 300 to 700 mile range, if you get 700 miles or less, odds are good that you'll have to take a bus or a train to make it your cost of doing it. The trip going there outweigh the cost of actually doing it. So you'd have to take the bus back to make things cheaper. Under 700 miles, it's just, unless you can find a nice plane deal, airplane deal to fly back, it just isn't the best of ideas. So Synergy wins out on the category on the most miles, especially in the wintertime, because it seems like they don't have enough drivers to cover them. Lately, they've been trying to do this 3 trips at a time deal, where you get 3 2,000-mile trips, and I'd work for Synergy all month long doing that if I didn't have these other companies that I still have to stay current with. And that becomes my issue with these other 2 companies down here and staying current. Lately, I'm starting to think that I should work maybe 2 weeks for Synergy and 2 weeks for Quality, and kind of rotate it. Maybe take Synergy RVs down to Texas 1 week, then take Quality back to Janesville, Wisconsin, which is just a 1,500-mile run, give or take. So they're both about 1,500 miles, give or take, down to Texas and back from Texas. And as long as you're okay with doing the same route back and forth, it would almost benefit to go that route and be able to take Quality back each time that I do it, because Quality has Laredo, Texas, that has a bunch of longer runs that go back to Janesville, Wisconsin, or over to basically Atlanta, Georgia area. And either way, it's a decent runoff to getting at least halfway back, if not all the way back, by driving. And if you could go from taking a bus that's less than $100 from the one drop-off location back to the pickup location of your next trip, you increase, obviously, all the profit that you made, because you didn't have to take the plane trip back that was $400 worth or whatever. And so these 2 are the top-rated companies for being non-tow car friendly and non-CDL friendly. And that's the perks of Synergy, and the other perk of Synergy is having a lot of RV dealerships that are located right near airports, especially out in California. You go out that way, it's easy to hop back onto San Francisco's airport, or Sacramento, or Los Angeles. But anywhere you deliver, you're within 30 to 100 miles of an airport, 30 miles of any kind of airport, but 100 miles of one of the bigger ones that are cheap to fly out of. So it makes it worth it for Synergy, especially when you drive all the way out there in this 2,000-mile run. You can come back if you find a nice airplane flight deal for $300 or less or whatever. You can end up averaging $100 to $150 a day for each day that you drove out there for 4 or 5 days worth profit after having done everything. Well, in wintertime, that's a little bit worse because you end up staying in hotel rooms, or at least I do anyway, because why freeze to death if you don't have to, is my opinion. But in the summertime, you can make bank on doing that. The cons for Synergy is they're Indiana-based, which means you have to end up flying back for them. So you basically, if you just worked for them, you'd end up having to fly back every single time because they're only out of Indiana. They pay less than, let's say, Pinnacle and other places do pay higher. But Pinnacle also happens to have less driver comfort. You know, you're just stuck in a cold metal step van versus this nice, comfortable RV. Especially the Class B vans that are RVs that Synergy has are nice, but they tend to be, you know, anywhere between 70 cents per mile and $1 to $1.10 per mile, depending on the load. And if the run is really hot, like the factory needs to get it there the next couple days because they've already sold the unit, then they'll pay you the $1 to $1.10 to do it. But you have to kind of sort through their load board. But they do have a load board, which should be on my pros list. They didn't add on there, but all the other ones have a load board except for Classic. But anyway, they do have a load board, and you can just basically pick and choose. You gotta go through there and see how much they pay, and then how many miles they're going, and what type of rig it is, and kind of a little bit be picky on you know, if you get a Class B, it'd be cheaper on fuel than a Class C, and so on. But if the Class C pays more than the Class B, you have to decide, you know, what's better, what's worse, and so you go that route. The bigger rigs, I could say, that's a con, take up more fuel. Especially the Class A's. The Class A's tend to pay more, like $1 to $1.10, but then they also take a hell of a lot more fuel. And when you do the math, taking the Class A the same place that you take a Class B, even with it paying more, the Class B ends up winning because the fuel mileage of a Class B versus a Class A. So sometimes it's just worth taking the Class A, or the Class B for 88 cents a mile, let's say, versus the Class A for $1 to $1.10 a mile, because the difference is the fuel. The fuel could end up costing you another $200 or $300 more than it would in a Class B. Those are the pros and cons of that. We're moving down to Quality Driveway that I found. Quality Driveway in the wintertime especially has a lot of 2,000-mile runs, or anywhere between 1,000, 1,500, and 2,000-mile runs. They also have the shorter runs, just like any of the companies do. But they have routinely a lot of bigger runs, like Laredo, Texas, up to Janesville, Wisconsin, I think is around 1,500, if I remember right, miles. Stuff like that. They also have box trucks that tend to have at least the AC and heater and air conditioning and all that, your basic driver comfort. And then they have their incomplete chassis, like I'm running for them right now, which I will show you because it's right outside the door. Nice pickup, kind of a truck, and it has the mud flaps on the back like that. And they call them incomplete because you can put a box on the back or a utility bed on the back, which they're going to do at the next step, but you're taking basically just the chassis from the factory that made the chassis down to where they're going to put the box or the utility on at the body shop. But the chassis part of it has driver comfort. It's a little bit rougher ride than your RV because of that back axle. It's lighter, it doesn't have much weight in the back, and so it ends up shaking the whole way. And like I said in the last video, if I did notice when I filled it up, it's a little bit heavier in the back axle now. At least where they put the gas tank was nice, right underneath the back axle, so that way it doesn't bounce as much, but it's not really designed to drive that way. We're just transporting them from point A to point B, but it's not really designed to live its life that way, I should say. Then there's a lot of trucks like that are coming out of Laredo, but once you get used to the ride, it's not bad, in my opinion. And they're decent on fuel. They're not great, but they're decent. Quality also has to deal with truck movers, where certain places like Laredo, Texas, they have a fuel card, so you don't have to worry about fuel. They just pay you a straight rate. That's what you get, and then however much fuel you take, you end up taking, you use. Like this current one, I started with 10 gallons in the tank, and then it says on the contract it's 165 gallons, I think it is, that I get available to me to fill up on a fuel card from Truck Movers, which is different than Quality. It's basically specifically a fuel card that only works on fuel at the Love's Travel Stop Fuel Island in the back. It's about the only place it works. But having not to have to pay fuel, you know exactly what you're going to make and exactly the profit you're going to make, because that's the only real deciding factor as you're going toward delivery, is how much fuel you're going to use. So it's nice to have those third-party contracts with Truck Movers. And I in general like running that truck. And then I mostly like the fact that I can go down to Texas with a Synergy RV and go back from Texas with Quality's incomplete chassis. So between the two, I could go 1,500 miles in 1,500 miles, paid for each way, and I make bank because I didn't have to spend spend the money on a plane or a bus or whatever train to get back. The cons are, with Quality, a lot of times you got to do your research on the pickup and really pay attention to the bill of lading that they send you, because the dispatchers sometimes don't tell you, even though they should. If you stay on with them long enough, they figure you're a veteran driver by that point, you should know. But they throw in these little hidden things in the BOL, like you have to go to this place to pick up the packet and then go to that address to go get the truck, which is a little bit annoying, like I had to do today, and I didn't notice that myself, which is my fault more than theirs. But I ended up having to walk down to get the packet and walk back, and I've had to do that before for them in a different location because I didn't pay attention to the BOL, and that's my fault, not really theirs. But it's a thing that you need to really pay attention to what you're doing and what the contract is that you're signing to do, because it says the pickup address for the packet is different from the pickup address for the truck, which they're usually within a mile of each other. It's not a huge deal. But today I went to Springfield, Ohio, and you can get a lift from Dayton pretty good. There's a lot of lifts in Dayton that'll take you right up there because they make money doing it, but there's hardly any lifts or Ubers once you get in Springfield. So if I accidentally let the lift go like I did without knowing it, I ended up having to walk it there and back, which is okay. I need to walk my fat butt around to stay exercise anyway. But I'm just saying, in general, as a con, you need to watch what you're doing with Quality, because they can get you in some really sketchy kind of spots. All in all, it's not a bad company to sign on with. But in general, some spots are better with a tow car, like I said on there. If I had a tow car today, I could just drive down there and get the packet and come back up. And I wonder and I question, maybe I should be getting a tow car. But at the same time, if I keep these two companies right here, I start to think I don't need a tow car, because they got nice long miles. And literally, like I say, I could go take Synergy from Goshen or Elkhart, Indiana, down to Alivardo, I think it is. A big dealership in Alivardo, which is next to Austin, Texas. Then take a bus. Greyhound bus goes from Austin literally right to the Laredo plant. If you go to Laredo North on that bus route, it'll take you right to the Navistar plant. You don't have to go down into Laredo or nothing. And I wish I'd known that when I started, because I was spending extra on lifts going back from downtown Laredo, where the bus dropped me off, up to the plant. And I found that out recently, that I don't have to do that. I can just go right to the bus stop itself off of Greyhound, which is really handy. But anyway, I could go from Austin right down to the Laredo plant in one bus trip. That's it. Well, maybe I might have to pay a lift to go downtown Austin's Greyhound to get on it. But you can lots of times do city bus from Alivardo to Austin if you have the time to do it. There's a city bus that runs there. But anyway, getting off a track, if I kept these two, I don't see as much of a reason for having a tow car, because I could just do that. I could take Synergy RV down there and a Laredo chassis back. And the Laredo ones, like I say, sometimes we'll go up to Janesville, Wisconsin, and that's handy, skip and jump right from Wisconsin over to Chicago by bus by taking Coach USA, and relatively cheap. Take Coach USA into Chicago, and then you take the Miller bus for ground Miller bus out to Elkhart or Goshen for decently cheap. Or you can skip all that and go from Coach USA, if you wanted to, off the Greyhound over to Millennium Station and get on the commuter train that goes out to South Bend. And that's free until they decide to not make it free because of COVID. But right now it's completely free to do it, going eastbound, which saves you $30 essentially, but it's more time to get across the city of Chicago to do it by subway. And a little bit of cost by subway, so sometimes it works, sometimes not. More so that route works when you're coming off the airport. But anyway, getting off of track, these two companies I think I'm going to keep because the pros kind of more so outweigh the cons. Going down here is the latest issue. Pinnacle always pays higher, and it's because they don't have the greatest of driver comfort. They basically have a bunch of step vans. Sometimes you can get a third-party box truck, but a lot of it's UPS and FedEx step vans, and it's okay to take them every now and then. But what I found out that I've been doing lately is I take the trip once a month just to stay current with them, and I don't know how much they're benefiting, or I'm benefiting from them, because they also, because of the con, a lot of times they try to pair a short run with a long run, which is very annoying, on top of basically needing a tow car to do it. Not all the time, but when you do the finances behind it, it's more and more so. It's like if I had a tow car, it'd make it worth it. But say, for example, going out of Elkhart, Pinnacle is located in Bristol, and that's okay as long as you have a car or a tow car or something, a rental car or tow car or whatever to get out there, because otherwise you're gonna have to pay taxi or the local taxi or Lyft or whatever for $30 or $40 every time you want to go out to Elkhart, which is a little bit annoying that it costs you to go get something. And like I say, the lack of driver comfort, they try to pair these runs where they get a short 200-mile run with a 700-mile run. Altogether, you get 900 miles out of the deal, but you paid for transportation twice. Actually, 4 times, because they're back. And by the time you do that, it cancels the point of even having done that 200-mile run. And they've tried to pair me doing that, and I've quit kind of using the Indiana terminal because of that. And Pinnacle comes in handy in other places like Georgia, where you can get decent runs where they don't pair it, where they just give you a 700-mile run, and that's okay then, because you're not having to deal with a paired run. But lately, between that and the lack of driver comfort, and like I just took that UPS van for them the other day, and with no cruise control, it's got a manual cruise where you have to pin your foot underneath the the hood, engine hood cover. A UPS driver showed me that, and it's like a manual cruise, and then have your foot pinched the whole entire time because they don't have any driver comforts, no heat, no air, no cruise. FedEx vans that Pinnacle moves are decent because they have all that, but more so, I don't know if I'm going to stay with Pinnacle much longer because of that. It just doesn't pay to do it. I've noticed, I didn't know in the wintertime that Synergy was like what they are because they have the snowboards that don't work in the winter for drivers. Now it's driver pick all the way through the wintertime, and now that I know that, Synergy is top dollar company to work with, because now I can literally go, at least during the winter months, I know I could go back-to-back 2,000-mile runs for Synergy and fly back, and another 2,000-mile run and fly back. I could work for them all month long during the winter. It's the summertime that you have to start fighting other drivers. Or not literally fighting them, but, trying to get ahead of them. Norton, on the other hand, has these oddball runs that start out of like Utah and some weird places where if I took a Synergy run out to Utah or Idaho or something, Norton might have something sitting in Idaho waiting to go. But they have these weird oddball third-party used equipment type of runs where they're like taking an older rental truck back to get scrapped or whatever. And the problem with that is now you're risking having to break down on the side of the road and having to deal with all that crap that could cost you time and money. I haven't had it happen to me yet, but I could see where it could happen. The benefits of them are they're Georgia-based, and they have these weird oddball runs where I could take something from Synergy to Idaho or Utah, and then they would help me get back out of there to a decent place. Utah back to Colorado, where if nothing else, I can get a cheap plane ticket out of Denver back to Chicago from Colorado, whereas I would have had to spend, say, I forget what it was, like $400 from Boise to Chicago. Now I could take a trip down from Boise to Denver, and now that same plane ticket from there to there costs $44 instead of $400. And it's a huge difference that Norton helps to cover. So I like Norton for that aspect, but the cons of Norton, and this has been shown on Facebook and when I've talked to other Norton drivers, routinely, Norton is pretty good about if you need an advance, they'll pay you within an hour, flat of you asking for an advance while you're on the run. As soon as you're off the run, it's whenever they pay you is whatever they pay you. And you better have your paperwork right, because nobody's going to tell you nothing. In terms of the the pay is kind of what irritates me. You can start and get your pay in at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you might have a half a decent chance of getting paid by noon. Most of the time, it'll be paid by 5 p.m., or sometimes it'll get paid by 9:30 the next day if there was too much of a list. But they cannot have that many drivers that do that. It's just they have so small of a company that they have like one person doing it, and quite frankly, it's like they put the drivers first that are out on the run, and they should. Technically, they have the priority. They should be paying them the advances and so on, taking care of us while we're out on the run. But the very annoying thing is if you're sitting there waiting for that paycheck to help get you back to wherever, Norton is not a great company to run for unless you're ahead already. If you have the savings held back and you have like $2,000 saved or $5,000 saved or whatever, then Norton's fine to run for, because then you're not depending on that money to show up within the day or two. But routinely, I'm not the only driver complaining about that. I've seen it on Facebook posts, and I've talked to other Norton drivers about it. And Norton just, they eventually get around to paying you, let's just put it that way, but they're not as fast as these other ones. Synergy, as soon as you scan that paperwork in, within an hour flat, roughly, usually depending on the time of day. But it also, they have a cutoff, so if you get there at 4 o'clock, they may or may not pay you by 5 because of the cutoff. But the rest of the time during the day, you send a payment, you scan your paperwork in for settlement at like 1 o'clock, bam, 2 o'clock you're paid. Same thing with quality, you can almost depend on it. Very rarely they screw up and not be able to pay you that within an hour or so. Pinnacle's the same way, they're pretty fast. Norton, on the other hand, 4 hours if you're lucky, if not all day, and possibly the next morning when they pay you at the end. And it's okay, like I say, if you have the money saved up and you only run for them once a month to get you out of a hard spot every now and then, Norton's not bad. But they are also somewhat of a liability, because now you're having to run for them once a month to stay current with them. But that may cost you having run a nice run for Synergy, because you're over here running a short run for Norton. And I don't know if it's worth messing with this. If I had a tow car, it'd be worth it, I think, because then I could get to these spots, and expenses wise it'd be less, depending. But then if you don't have a reliable tow car, it could be an issue too. Next is Classic, and I'll go over that again. They don't have a load board. They're a nice local little mom and pop type company. If you're local to Chicago or northern Indiana or even Ohio, anywhere basically around Indiana, Michigan, wherever, that would be the perfect little company for you to run these nice little weekend runs. They only really have step fans. They don't have a load board, so the dispatch picks what you want. You can say a general area of where you want to go, and then they take the run that they want, and they say, this is what we have, when they could have something else that you don't know about because they don't have a load board. It's not a bad deal if you're a local company. Synergy pays right on time like the rest of these other people. I mean, Classic pays right on time like the rest of these companies like Synergy and all that. Nothing bad about them to say about the rest of it. It's just not really my type of company because of the whole mom and pop atmosphere. They may have drivers that have worked there for 5 years and they get the good 2,000-mile runs if Classic has them. But the 7 or 8 times I tried to call them, I didn't get anything for a run. Could just be my experience too, who knows, but that's from what I've heard anyway. It's a Classic, that's the way they do things there, and it's okay. It's just not the greatest of companies for me. I would keep it in mind if anything else doesn't work out with the other stuff, or if I hear that they're doing better than the other companies or something, might go back, because I can always get rehired back on. But it's not really worth my running once a month for them, because that's the problem, is all these companies you have to run at least once a month to stay current with their insurance, and I can see their point of view on that. But some days I wish that I could go 6 months without having to run for Norton, and then all of a sudden get on the load board and say, oh, I'm good to go, and go run for them, and not have to worry about them for another 6 months. Not that I want to do that to them either, but it'd be nice to have a little more flexibility with it than that. Horizon and Indiana Transport are mostly only pull only. They do have some driveaways, but a lot of the driveaways are CDL requirements, and if you have a CDL already, I've heard those are the 2 companies to work for. If you already have a CDL, that's where you want to go apply to, because they pay the best, I guess, in terms of the CDL pull and driveaways. Bennett Driveway, I've heard, is in Iowa based, which that could work out for me every now and then, but Iowa is such kind of a hard place to go to specifically just to get a run. I think I could just see it costing me more money than it's worth to go out there and get it, because they're Iowa based. So literally, I think that, as far as I know anyway, they only have an Iowa terminal. They may have like third off. I haven't talked to them for sure, so I don't know for sure yet. But they may have third-party terminals in other places. But from what I've heard, their driveway division anyway only is Iowa based. But there is a big old RV factory or something out there that they run for, and it's like a spoke and wheel type of thing where they have the wheel here, and then all the spokes stick out from Iowa in every direction, and you can take a run from Iowa in every direction, which would be 1,500 miles in some instances, but not much above 1,500 miles because Iowa's smack dab in the middle of the country. But I've also heard that if you have a passport and can run into Canada, you can make a lot of miles because they also send a lot of stuff up to Alaska. That's the other thing, that's Synergy that I haven't done yet because of COVID and the restrictions and all that crap. I haven't tried it, but I would like to next summer maybe be able to go up to Alaska and take a 3,600 mile run, I think it is, routinely for Synergy and Quality. They have those runs that take you the week, and they pay big, and then you can get cheap fare from Alaska back to, I think it's Anchorage down to Chicago. Well, cheap in comparison to the 3,600 miles worth of money you just made. And so that's the gist of Norton and Pinnacle. They have their ups and downs more so than the other two, and I'm really starting to think maybe my best option is to stay with these two. But then the other part of me in my head says if I limit myself down to those two and then one or the other starts going slower, I may regret this decision of not staying with these ones. But at the same time, the irritating thing about it is you have to run at least one run each month to stay current with them. You can stretch that out a little. You can go about 60 days, give or take. But I keep thinking, is it really worth my time and effort to keep on their list and their load board to only run one run that I need to have, or I think I need to have? Let's say in Georgia. Say I went from Synergy in Elkhart and Goshen down to, like I said, Alvarado, which is Austin, Texas, and then took the bus over to Laredo and ran one for Quality over from Laredo to Atlanta or that area. Then you either fly back from Atlanta or you take Pinnacle or Norton run from Georgia and go up to Pennsylvania, which is another decent good run for 700 or 800 miles worth. But then you're stuck in Pennsylvania, so yeah. But they tend to have their own market for where to put stuff or where they send stuff to, and I don't know. I'm 50-50 decided on whether I should get rid of these ones or stop working with them, or if I should keep them. If I had a tow car, it'd make more sense. Those ones. So basically, the summary is these two right here make sense to run for whether you have a tow car or not, because they're non-tow car friendly. Everywhere you go, for the most part, you can get away with not having to have a tow car. You get pretty cheap Lyft rides to wherever you need to go to get out of wherever. And a lot of times it's airports and so on. These ones, depending on where they pick up and drop off from, you could spend a lot on transportation cost if you don't have a tow car. And so I'm wondering if it's worth dragging a tow car around for those in order to have one for those. I just don't know. Now that I know for a fact that Synergy and Quality stay busy in the wintertime, now it's a game changer has been made because now these two have proven themselves over the winter. And that's the biggest thing. If they could stay busy at least 6 months out of the year, during the summertime I have to fight a little with other drivers, but between the two I should be able to, hopefully, because they're both in the same market up in Elkhart and Goshen, I would just fly back and fight for the longer runs, I think, because I did pretty good last summer even with more drivers, but I have noticed a huge driver drop off right when probably October, November, December is when I've noticed where the load board has gotten huge and the drivers are few and far between, and these two companies are calling me up all the time saying, can you take this for you, can you do that for Synergy right now is offering 3 back-to-back trips at a shot, so you can take 2,000-mile trips 3 times, which is excellent in terms of the miles. But then, like I say before, then you end up starting to lose out on that, and that's why Classic ended up terminating my contract because I wasn't there running for them because it didn't make sense to run for them. I still have to return their plates too. I keep reminding myself of that. These two might end up the same way. I don't know if it's really worth that effort, but I'm like I say, when the CPA time comes around, now that this is the end of the year, I can, and I've taken enough trips from everybody, I can add everybody's trips up and everybody's expenses up. But I'm starting to think that these two right here are going to go the same way as Classic, because I think their expenses and their profit end up canceling each other out. Versus here, I'm actually making profit. So, just my opinion of what I've found out lately. This is a 30-minute video now. It's going to take forever for me to upload this probably tonight. But I wanted to go over the details of what I found out recently, and with this winter, showing that these two have huge load boards in the winter with hardly any drivers. It's just a driver's market all winter long, at least from what I see for the 3 or 4 months of the beginning of winter, and I can almost guarantee that January and February and March are going to be the same way. And then in end of March, it's going to go back to more and more drivers getting on, and you can slowly tell that the load board gets shorter and shorter because everybody's calling in and getting what they want. So I'll have to get ahead of the team, of seeing what I want and calling ahead, and reserving what I want ahead of time, and being able to live up to the time frame, because basically when you reserve something, that means you have to get back there by that date and time to take it. And so in the summertime, it's a little bit more hairy, but the wintertime is proven that the winter kind of basically makes up for the summer as long as you're willing to run it. And I've also proven that I can run to Texas and Georgia and Florida and stuff like that all winter long, because again, it's driver's choice, because all the drivers have dropped off. So yeah, it'll be less miles, but I will still be making the amount of miles that I need to go all winter long and stay in warmer climate. I don't have to fight for runs. Versus during the summertime when it's hotter in the summer in the south and people don't want to run down south. They all want to run out northwest because it's nice and cooler weather. They all want the long miles out northwest like I would. So I have to fight a little in the summer, but in the wintertime, they more than make up for it. So one kind of helps wash the other out. And if you do this year-round, I could see where you can make money on these two year-round. These ones, I don't know. They're up for the draw board, because I think I have to sit down and do their expenses, liabilities, and their profit and see if they were worth running for. These ones, I guarantee you, were worth running for, because I can take these 2,000-mile runs, and then I make 100 to 150 a day profit off of, depending on the kind of airplane deal I get back flying back. If I just took them to California or Washington or wherever and flew back, that's a 4 or 5 day trip. I profit $400 or $500, and then plus and then a little 50 here or there. It might be $600 or $700 altogether instead of $400 or $500, depending on the deals that you get. That's after fuel. That's after the cost of the transportation back, and I'm making $600 every week or something, which isn't much, but that's pure profit. I've already paid for my meals that week. I've already paid for the fuel. I've paid for the plane trip back. I've paid for everything I needed on the road, and I'm still making that profit and saving it back. These two will do that. These two, not so much. They kind of wash each other out, and you get $200 profit, give or take, depending on the load that you take. And they have not had very long loads. I think I ran Pinnacle once, 1,100 miles, if I remember right. But I've got to go into my storage and see exactly, basically put the trips back to back to back and write